Yeah, the response to the trial has been very strange. And I guess the first place to start is before the trial, moments before the start of the trial, his family and legal team gathered outside of the courthouse to call for accountability by taking a knee, which, I mean, the Colin Kaepernick thing, I remember at the time thinking, look, that you take a knee when you're pledging submission to something, so that's not really a very, very noble way of protesting if you're saying that Black Lives Matter and all that sort of thing. And this has just been folded into the George Floyd trial, but the thing is, the optics are terrible on it. And I don't want to make jokes about it, but it just looks really bad to me.
Like the Colin Kaepernick, I believe, was taking the knee for the flag.
Yeah.
And then George Floyd is killed by someone taking a knee on him. That's the argument from, his family. So in response, they start taking knees. It is strange.
It's really bizarre.
I mean, it's like the Christian cross, where it's like, this is our symbol of Jesus, our prophet, him dying.
Yeah, but I mean, at least the point of Jesus' death is the suffering on behalf of mankind, as Christians view it, right? So that there is at least a kind of redemptive aspect to Jesus on the cross. So Jesus isn't going to be like, oh, I'm offended by crosses, because no, that was the point. You're meant to remember that. But that's not what's the case.
I mean, would BLM not argue that this is sort of, a show of martyrdom, that he's died in this way?
They could, but then they're essentially saying that George Floyd is the same as Christ.
They would. But, I mean, they keep drawing him like that. So.
They do keep drawing him like that. So they took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which was the original time that people, used. I don't know why it's changed to, 9:15 or whatever. But
9:29.
9:29, whatever it is. But this is the length of time for the video, and so we get to hear from them. Today starts a landmark trial that will be a referendum on how far America has come for its quest for equality and justice for all, said the attorney Ben Crump, who's the one that you first showed, the black attorney. We're not asking for anything extraordinary, we're asking for equal justice under the law. Okay, but if it turns out that through all of the various reports and examinations that in fact George Floyd did die of a drug overdose, are you just going to simply go, well, we wanted equality under the law has been done, Derek Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd, I retract everything that I said?
Because that would be justice.
That would be justice.
If he has died of a drug overdose.
If that were the case. I mean, don't get me wrong, if Derek Chauvin had damaged his lung, his trachea or whatever, and stopped him from breathing, and that was the reason that he died, fair enough. Send him to jail, whatever the punishment is to be. That's fine. That would be fine too. I don't care. But the point is that this seems essentially to be asking for something of a lynching. It doesn't matter what the truth really is. What matters is they get their pound of flesh, and it happens to have come in the form of Derek Chauvin. So,
there's already a pre-approved outcome for them, and if it's not met, regardless of the facts,
then it's a referendum on America. That's the thing. America is a racist state that doesn't have equality and justice for all if Derek Chauvin isn't found guilty. So, it's interesting. Of course, the usual sort of race grifters turned up. Al Sharpton turned up, which you can imagine went well. Another thing by Ben Crump, by the way. He says, please do not be distracted. What killed George Floyd was an overdose of excessive force.
Not very catchy.
I mean, I don't want to start making jokes. It's kind of a macabre thing to make jokes about. But what a terrible bit of messaging that is. He also refuted the characterization of the trial as a difficult one, saying repeatedly that the murder case is not hard when you watch that torture video of George Floyd. If this trial is hard, we have two justice systems in America, says Floyd's nephew, Brandon Williams, one for white America and another for black America. And of course, Al Sharpton said, Chauvin is in the courtroom, but America is on trial.
They don't care what the outcome is, do
they? They don't care. They do not care. They have come to the conclusion that Derek Chauvin is a racist, and it was definitely the knee on the neck that killed him. There is no room for doubt here, and if doubt is found and Chauvin is not convicted, then in fact America is a racist country, but then that's Al Sharpton's entire position on everything, so I don't see why we should expect anything different, really. Anyway, one of his brothers said apparently that Minnesota had offered George Floyd so much, and George Floyd came to the city to make a better way for himself. The truth was he was killed in the streets. interesting how they know the truth before the trial's been done and the evidence has been given. Anyway, Crump posted on Twitter, "We know if George Floyd was a white American citizen, no one would be saying this is a hard case." He didn't say this on Twitter, sorry, he said this in a press conference. But honestly, I was not impressed with his little press conference either. It just seemed like amateur hour race grifting, frankly. But I don't think he's wrong there. He's right. If George Floyd was white, no one would be accusing Chauvin of murder. They'd be like, oh, that was a druggie who died of an overdose.
Well, there have been cases of this before. I remember when everyone was surprised that this happened. At the same time, people circulated an incident from Texas in which the cops did exactly the same thing and the suspect died, and it was white.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there we go. See, like I said, it wouldn't be a difficult one. Everyone would be like, well, he's a druggie. And Crump put out another Twitter statement saying, "Everything you hear today will attempt to assassinate George Floyd's character, but remember, this is the trial of Derek Chauvin, not George Floyd." Well, I mean, technically that is true, but the question of George Floyd's character is actually germane to what has happened, and trying to pretend that George Floyd may have not been responsible for his own particular situation when it comes to the amount of drugs in his system or his bad health that may have contributed to his death. It kind of is a referendum on George Floyd as well, as an individual.
I mean, the idea that everything you hear today will attempt to assassinate his character, but is any of it false?
Yeah, that's the thing. The facts might make George Floyd look like a bad person. Anyway, let's go to the next one, which is just this sort of thing that's being passed around. Now, this is the left-wing / Black Lives Matter view of George Floyd: a father, a brother, a son, grieving the recent loss of his mother, a basketball star, the type of person who walked colleagues to their cars, committed to his church, and a mentor to young men, a human being.
Mentor to young men? He's a drug addict.
No. Look, George Floyd is not necessarily a two-dimensional person either.
Well, no, I can believe he's a son, a father, a brother, blah, blah,
Sure.
blah, blah, blah. But the idea he's a mentor to young men.
The Cooney Homes housing project. Well, maybe he was. But the thing is, I don't think I would use George Floyd as a model to follow. We have just a thing on the next one. In 2009, Floyd was arrested for first-degree felony charge due to assault and armed robbery he took part in 2007. He spent 5 years in prison for breaking into this lady's house with the intent to rob her. He wore a blue uniform to look like a government employee to gain the lady's trust. And as soon as she realised that he was impersonating a government worker, she tried to shut the door, but he forced his way into the house. A truck pulled up, 5 people exited and went into the lady's house. He put a gun to her stomach, and his friends ransacked the place. I mean, he's 6'6". She was just a little lady, pregnant apparently. Not finding any cash, Floyd and the men took the jewellery and the lady's cell phone, then fled the scene. And that was how he found himself in jail for 5 years.
I mean, none of that, just to point out, like, none of this is, warranted a death sentence.
No, of course not. But
it's this narrative of, like, he's Jesus, he's a mentor of young men, he's a great guy.
Right. So, according to the toxicology report, he was, of course, intoxicated with fentanyl, methamphetamine, traces of cannabinoids, morphine at the time of his death. These were not the principal factors behind his death, apparently, but the underlying conditions means he won't do well with stress, all this sort of stuff. But the thing is, after he served 5 years in Harris County Jail, he left moved to Minneapolis from Texas in 2014. And he intended apparently to start a peaceful life, and the decision to change apparently cost him his life. Leaving all the violence and robbery acts behind, he pledged to lead a better life as he shifted to the new city. In his initial days, Floyd found a job as a bouncer at a local restaurant, and he made attempts to change his behavior, and a recent video showed Floyd encouraging children and teenagers to stop gun violence. So it's not to say that he didn't look at his past life and what's currently going on in the black community and said, well, look, actually, maybe I've been part of the problem. Maybe I've got some life advice that I can share with younger people. Because it looks like he did.
Yeah, but did he stop any of the things he said that were causing this place to be bad?
Well, I mean, he didn't stop taking drugs.
But he also didn't stop breaking the law.
Well, no, he did.
No, he gave the counterfeit $20 bill to the clerk, for example.
Good point. Okay, he stopped robbing people and being violent to people.
He stopped violently robbing.
Yes. Okay. He stopped violently robbing people, which, I mean, that's something.
It is something, but it's again.
That's not nothing.
I really hate this view of, like, he's basically an angel, and I'm just like,
I'm not saying he's an angel. All I'm saying is that he's not beyond redemption, because I don't think anyone should be beyond redemption. And it does seem.
I mean, this doesn't deserve a death penalty either way.
Well, no, but obviously. But the point is, he seems to have at least done something to say, well, maybe we don't have to be exactly as we are being right now. Maybe things can improve. But anyway, the response to this from the Twitter sphere, we may as well look at because it's just amusing. This one is someone called Sonny Hostin. As a former prosecutor, I've never seen a case with such clear-cut evidence of murder as in the Chauvin trial. Murder on video. We all saw it. The world saw it. What does it say about our society if Chauvin is acquitted? It says that black lives don't matter, period. There we go. That's what it'll say. Black lives don't matter. It's a referendum on America. It's a referendum on race.
It's also just what a stupid prosecutor you are then. You just saw the, let's say, observers who were watching this take place, took their footage. That was enough for you. You're not going to watch the footage from the officer's side. You're not going to care about any of the conversations that happened over radio.
The medical reports, none of that matters.
Just, right? I've seen the footage, hang him.
Yeah, I'm emotionally charged. Hang Chauvin, Nazir Afzal put this tweet out, and I agree with almost all of it, to be honest. The Derek Chauvin trial starts today. This is not the George Floyd trial. He is not here. True. What Floyd was convicted of before his death is entirely irrelevant. True. Chauvin and the other cops did not do a background check before they stood in his neck. They didn't stand on his neck, but true. And Floyd was a victim. True. But the victim of what? Well, the question is it Derek Chauvin or is it George Floyd? Because that's really what the debate is over. And I mean, there seems to be fairly adequate evidence that Chauvin didn't act in a way that wasn't sanctioned by the police department. So, but this really is kind of a larger question, isn't it? It's not just, about George Floyd. It's really about whether a black man and by extension the black community are responsible for their own actions. And I hate to have to say this because it seems inappropriate given how it's the death of a man who was, doubtless suffering, had a rough life. I mean, assuming everything we know is true, but at the end of the day, if it turns out that it is about the fact that he was overdosed on drugs and had terrible health, and that's the thing that killed him, because he was suffering from a lack of breath and whatever it is, because he took something, because the cops arrested him, and we saw all of this through the body cam footage, then it's about whether he can be held responsible for his own actions.
Yeah.
And
is he a victim of freedom? He was free to do what he wanted to do, and if he decided to take drugs to a point that killed him, if that turns out to be the case, then what's the response? I mean, the leftists here want everything to be regulated in your life perfectly so the state says it. So they'll take the view that, oh no, well then we should get rid of people's ability to take such free choices.
Yeah.
Or he shouldn't have such abilities to do things. Instead.
Yeah. I mean, let's just carry on because we can look at what a proud socialist on Twitter has to say about it. This is quite a well-seen tweet. It's from Ryan Knight with a hammer and sickle in his bio. It does not matter that George Floyd had drugs in his system because he is not on trial and fentanyl did not put a knee on his neck for over 9 minutes. It may have done, actually. It could well be that fentanyl was the reason that he couldn't breathe. And so it does matter, actually, Mr. Communist. Derek Chauvin did, and he is a cold-blooded killer, period, case closed. That's the kind of justice you can expect from the communists. You're a cop, I think you're a cold-blooded killer, case closed, even though it could be that literally Derek Chauvin had no method of preventing George Floyd from dying. It could be that if he'd done nothing, just sat him in the car and just looked at him, George Floyd may well have died from this overdose anyway, so Derek Chauvin couldn't have done anything.
It would still be the cops' fault, wouldn't it?
It would still be his fault, though, because this guy's a communist and he hates the cops. And I found this amazing one on the Independent as well. This next one, this is supposed to be the trial of Derek Chauvin. It's not the trial of George Floyd. And everyone keeps saying this, but it's kind of, well, it depends what the reason for George Floyd's death was. We're not saying we know either way, but there is significant evidence to indicate. I
mean, de jure it might be okay, Derek Chauvin, but de facto it's a debate about who killed him.
Yeah.
So,
and if George Floyd overdosed, then it wasn't the police. But anyway, thing is, it doesn't matter. Even if everything the worst right-wing pundit says turns out to be true, it doesn't matter. The price of being a flawed character is not execution. No character trait deprives a person of their right to life and due process. Nothing that George Floyd or any other unarmed black person killed did justifies extrajudicial killing. Nothing. But if he didn't kill him and George Floyd died of an overdose, then this ages really badly, and this whole thing ages really badly. But this is the current narrative of the left. And don't get me wrong, obviously, having committed a crime is not an excuse for a cop to kill you, but the question is not, is that acceptable? The question is, did Derek Chauvin kill George Floyd? And it may well be the answer is no. I mean, it could be the answer is yes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a stake in this either way.
No.
But I don't know what these people are going to do when they're taking such a bold stance of, nah, like, this guy is a killer, nothing else matters, the facts can go to hell.
Yeah. I mean, you should see some of the protests about it. It's like people just yelling, just like huffing and puffing into the microphone going, yeah, everything's evil, everything's racist, everything's bad, blah, 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 blah. And it's like the fact that the court is currently built up like a goddamn military base because they're expecting essentially to be attacked in the same way that Antifa and Black Lives Matter have attacked previous institutions and federal buildings, things like this. They know what's going to happen because what's going to happen is the facts are going to show that George Floyd is responsible for his own death. Derek Chauvin followed police procedure, didn't do anything wrong, is going to be the sort of thing that the media will be like, right, that's it. America's a racist country. We've had this referendum. It's a two-tier justice system. Black people can't get justice. And everything's going to explode. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.